If you're somebody who collects video games, the number one thing you've got your fingers crossed for are that video game prices will go down because, oh my goodness, they are high. And while I can't whip out a crystal ball on this one to say for sure what will happen, I do have a hunch and we have a bit of circumstantial evidence to point us in the direction of how things will go. And it's no secret why we want the prices of some of these games to go down. Sometimes there will be a game that we're interested in and we'll be like, all right, this looks great, and then we'll see the price and we'll say, well, looks like I'm not getting this game. Now, to figure out if the prices will ever go back down, first we need to look at why the prices are so high to begin with. And the number one thing is that kids who grew up with these video games are now adults, they have disposable income, and they buy these games. So it stands to reason that nobody is going to care about a particular video game console as much as the people who grew up with it, or at least grew up around it. For example, I grew up with the Sega Genesis, but I was obviously very aware of Super Nintendo, and therefore I collect for Super Nintendo nowadays. Now you might be thinking, hold on a second, retro video games have become a lot more commercially viable in recent years, with the biggest examples being stuff like the mini consoles, allowing entire new younger generations to play these older retro video games. But that's just the thing, if these younger generations are going to be playing these retro video games, they're just going to do it with a mini console or on their Nintendo Switch or Raspberry Pi, something like that. They don't have that attachment to the old original hardware like we do. And plus, it's not like they're going to want to hunt down something like a CRT TV. They'd look at something like that and be like, what the heck is this? Why did TVs used to be so big? We're the ones who are into all that kind of stuff. So in theory, once us, the people who are collecting the majority of this stuff, if we ever lose interest, the prices should go down, right? Well, some of us plan on playing video games until the day we die. Now, other people do get out of it though. You hear stories of people saying like they just don't have enough free time anymore to do it and they get out of it. You see people selling off their entire collections and getting out of retro gaming. Sometimes just the responsibilities of being an adult are too much, or maybe they just flat out decide they're over it, that like it's a passing phase or something, and they don't like retro video games anymore. Sometimes people make bad life decisions, what can I say? And we've already seen some evidence of this happening with the original Nintendo. Now, the original Nintendo is at the perfect point where you can clearly see people who grew up with it, got older, started collecting it, and now it's been years later since even that point, and they've decided, okay, I actually, you know what, I don't think I'm into that. I'm gonna sell off all my stuff. As a result, we've seen the value of some games, emphasis on some games, start to drop. There are still some other games that continue to hold their value and, if anything, are just going to keep increasing in value. Some of the more high-profile games, stuff like Little Samson, will always hold its value and, if anything, probably just continue to increase in value because of the reputation it's built at this point, where it has such a bullseye on it that there's always going to be people who want to get that game. And not to mention, the people who are after a game like that, they're not going anywhere. I mean, they've been collecting for a while, most likely, or maybe if they just got into it, it's a game that jumps out and they're like, ooh, that's that expensive game everybody wants. So there's always going to be people after those games. My prediction going forward is that the popular games will always hold their value at least somewhat, and not just the crazy expensive stuff like stadium events or Little Samson, but the popular games, you know, stuff like the Contra games, the Mega Man games, the Mario games, Punch-Out, River City Ransom, you know, the good games that people actually want to play. Those will always hold their value somewhat. Where you're really going to see prices dropping on games is the stuff that people just kind of don't really want to play, and maybe they collected it a few years ago just because they were collecting NES games, and so they were like, sure, I'll collect this game. Or maybe they were just trying to get as many NES games as they can. I mean, you know how collectors are. But I think also we are going to see across the board prices drop on all the games for something like Nintendo, because we've already seen it. Once the NES mini console came out, you did see a lot of even the more popular games drop in price a little bit. Now, it's gone actually up a little in some cases because of this quarantine thing that, has made prices skyrocket across the board pretty much. But yeah, the more ways there are to play these games, people are going to utilize those ways and not necessarily need those old original cartridges. Naturally, we've gotten to the point now where consoles that came after the original NES have also increased in value. We saw it with Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis stuff, we saw it with Sega Saturn, PlayStation 1, Dreamcast, and even all the way up to GameCube now, which has really been shooting up in price. And again, I predict that what we'll see is the people who grew up with those systems then started collecting for them as an adult. Once enough years go by that they've been collecting them, some of them will get out of it. Not all of us are going to hang on to our games until we're dead. And once enough people let go of their games, the prices will go down because not only are they not collecting anymore and contributing to the demand, but they're actually putting more supply out there for the people who actually do want the games. Something that I do find interesting is it would almost be sad in a way if our video games weren't really worth much in the future, just because that would mean nobody cares anymore. As much as it sucks to have to pay high prices to get some games, it is kind of nice to at least know that people care about this stuff. I mean, there's so many things people collect that aren't really worth much of anything. Think about this. How many things are there that you can collect or even just own that you can actually use and they go up in value over time? Almost nothing. Maybe like a house? Video games are in a very rare category. I mean, you think about something like cars? Nope. Food? Hell no. And like I said before, I do think the value of our video games, those days are numbered. I don't know how many days it will be. I don't know how long it's going to take, but at some point, those values are going down. So if you're collecting video games, you better be in it because you like playing these games and you have passion for it. Now, of course, like I said, some of the more popular games will always hold their value, I think. The more popular the game, the better its odds are, but we'll see. You never know for sure what kind of trends are going to happen in the future. There could be a big, huge trend that happens where it's really cool for kids to start collecting the video games that their parents owned as kids. I mean, who knows? I certainly know that a lot of you are going to be, influencing your kids to think that those original consoles and games are cool. So that's always a possibility. But that about does it for my thoughts. Of course, because this is such a speculative thing, I would be very interested in hearing what all of you think in terms of will prices go down? Where are we going to see it? How is it going to happen? What are all the different factors? All the kind of stuff I talked about in this video. I'd be really curious what your thoughts are. So be sure to leave those comments down below as always, and I will see ya in the next video.
He's the retro bird, yeah, and he's talking about video games. He's